Welcome to another section of this wonderful tutorial. In this particular tutorial, I'm going to explain to you arrays and strings in C++. So let's start with arrays. Arrays allow you to store multiple values of the same type in one variable. Think of arrays like you storing the scores of your students in one container. In actual sense, one would like to create multiple variables to store all the values. But because of arrays, you can store all the scores of the students in one container, and that is one use of arrays. So in this particular section, I'm going to teach you how to declare and then initialize your arrays. Now let's start. So we actually need this array string header file to perform basic input and output operations. And then from the std namespace, we'll be using cin and then cout for our output and input operations. Then for every C++ program, we need an int main function which returns an integer. Okay. Now to declare an array, we first of all have to know the data type of the values that are supposed to be stored in array. So for instance, if I want to store the scores of the students in my class, I simply have to do floats scores, and then I have to give the size of my students or the size of my class. I can give it 20. So this is how we declare an array. So the first, this tells you the data type of the values that's supposed to be stored in the array, and then the scores here represent the name of the array, and then the 20 represent the size of the array. The 20 simply refers to the maximum number of elements that can be stored in this array. Now the second point is, after initializing an array, how do you, after declaring an array, how do you initialize it with some values? Mostly arrays are accessed using what we call an index. So say for instance, if you have 20 elements in your array, you can access each individual element using what we call indexing, right? So in C++, indexing starts from 0. So in our case where we have a maximum of 20 elements, our indexing will start from 0 to 19. So if I want to populate the first item in my array, I simply have to do scores. Then the index representing the first element in the array will be 0. So I can give it 50. And then for the second element, the index will be 1. And I can give it, say, 17. For the next other element, the index would be 2. That's for the third element. And that will be 45. And this is how we can initialize the value of each element in the array. So if I decide to print out the value of the first element, so let me do scores 0. So let me just copy and paste line 17 and then just change the indexing. So let me change this 1, 2, and then 3. Mind you, we did not initialize the value of the fourth element in the array. So let me just save this file and then compile my code here. Compile your C++ code, you simply have to do gin++, then the name of the source code or the source file you want to compile, and I have main.cpp. After compilation, you'll be given an executable file. So with this executable file, I want to give it a name of main. And then as you can see, an executable file has been generated for us with main. So to run this executable file, I just have to do this. Right? If you're on Windows, your case might be different. For those on Windows, you simply have to do main and you are good to go. Now as you could see, my first element was 50, 50 is here. My second element was 17, third element was 45. Now the fourth element, which was not initialized, see the value we had here. So our program automatically assigned a default value to that particular element, and this is not good. That's why whenever you declare an array, it's very good for you as a programmer to initialize the array with your own default values, right? Good. Now let's look at how you traverse, okay, how we are going to traverse this particular array called scores. Traversing an array simply refers to accessing each individual element in the array. So let me just clear this. Let me comment this out. Now this time, instead of me to manually do scores with index 0 and assigning it a value of 50, I want to use the a loop to initialize each element in the array, right? So I'm going to use a for loop. So for and then int I. Remember array indexing start from 0. So I'm going to start my I from 0, and I should be less than the size of the array. Remember the size of the array is 20. And then I want to, for every iteration, the index of the array is supposed to be increased by 1, right? It's an integer, so I plus plus weight. So in between the curly braces here, what do I want to do? I want to just initialize each element in the array with a value. So scores, which is the name of the array, and then in between this bracket here, I want to put the element, right? The position of the element where I want to give the value. So I could say I, and then I will assign the value at that particular position with I, which is the curly braces. So what this line is simply doing is that it's simply initializing the element in the array with some values, right? So then let me just copy and paste this code here. Now this time I'm not going to inside this, I'm not going to initialize the values here, but I'm rather going to print out the value in each part of the array. So see out scores, and then I use I as the index weight. Now I'm good to go. So as you can see, this part I'm initializing the elements in the array with some values, and with this part too, I'm just printing out the value that has been initialized. So let me just save the file and then recompile again because I've made changes to the source code. It's not compiling, I just run the code. So as you could see now, the array was initializing the array is now initialized with some values. So the first element was given a value of 0, second was 1, then now up to 19. So that's how we traverse through arrays. Basically, that's it. Now let's move on to strings. Let me comment this out. So let's move on to strings. So strings allows us to store and manipulate text data, right? There are mainly two ways of dealing with strings in C++. Okay, we have the using the string class in C++ or using the C style of declaring strings. But let me start with the C style. So with the C style, strings are just um, an array of characters, right? So if I simply do char username, right? So char username, and I can actually give it 20, and then let me give it my 20. Wait. So with this is somehow like I have declared an array with a data type of char, and the maximum number of elements that could be in this array is 20. That's what I'm saying. So this is how in C language we mostly deal with arrays. And if I decide to print out the value of username, let's see what I get. So let me clear my screen, and now let me compile the code again and then see. So now I have Frank 20. So this is how we actually deal with strings in C++. That's the C star way. And we have another thing that you have to note. So if you want to make a difference between an array and then between a string and then a character, mind you, we use this double quote, right? So the double quote tells the program that you are going to actually deal with strings and not characters. Wait. Now one way I could actually do this char vowels. Let me not do anything to it. And then now let me initialize like the way I do for array. So character A, uh, and let me decide to print out vowels, right? Let me print out vowels and see what we get. So let me clear this and then now let me do this. So as you could see, for the vowels you have A, I, O, U. Although this is just a normal array, right? So in actual sense, I just want to make a point that strings are just collection of characters with a null terminator. So this is a null terminator. That's how we deal with strings in the C star way. And we have another way. So this time we have to include uh, the string class, right? The string header file in C. So this string header file is actually a class. You will deal with a class in my uh, in the video that I'll create, not here. With the string class, like the way you initialize variables, I can't. Let me comment this out. You simply have to do string, right? So string, that is the data type I want to store, username, and I can simply do Frank. Okay? And then I can also have string vowels A I O U. I'm getting an error here because I use a single quote instead of a double quote. So great. Now if I compile this and then run, I'm getting the same result. So this is using the string class and this is using the C star. Now this string class comes with a lot of methods, right? So basically let's check some of the methods. So if I do username dot, see I have a bunch of methods that can be performed on this string here. So I have what we call the length, right? So length will just So length is just supposed to return the total length of the string. So as simple as that. So you can, in your free time, you can take a look at the the various methods that comes with the string class, and then you'll be fine with that. So you see I had 5 here, right? So if you check one, Frank is just 5 characters. But when you check here, it's just six, right? Six char here. The last character is just the not terminator here that we have here. By natural sense, the string class will just return 5 for you. So that is how we deal with strings in C++ and how we also deal with arrays in C++.
Beats.